Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. We're delighted you're in class with us. We broadcast 2 hours a day, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time, and we're picked up, tape delay, by many stations across the United States, and I want to thank all of you for doing that. Ron Gibson records this broadcast every day and posts it on the Ron Gibson channel on YouTube, and you can go to YouTube and search for Ron Gibson, Gibson, and you'll find USA Prepares right there, and you can click and listen anytime you want. Also, you can listen via the telephone listen line, 605-477-3249. And, of course, we originate at Genesis Communications Network, and I'm so thankful to Genesis for allowing us to broadcast, and also Republic Broadcasting, who then carries our broadcast one day later. Thank you, John Statmiller of Republic Broadcasting. George is with us. George in New Hampshire, USA Prepares instructor. How are you, George?
Good, Vin. How are you?
Good. You know, George, I was thinking about gun shows, and I was thinking they have changed over the years. And the first gun shows that I went to were in the 1970s and then the 1980s, and wow, have they changed. Have you seen changes in gun shows as well? Yes. And I think we had just touched on this the other day when we were talking, that at one time, the gun shows were just run by a bunch of organizations who had an interest in guns. They might be using it to raise some revenue for certain activities, whether it's for promoting, youth marksmanship programs, or just informing the public of the right to bear arms, and also to make sure that that right's protected. That it shifted where I saw that it was almost like the mom and pop corner stores, where in other words they were there, it supplemented income, and at the same time it was an opportunity for a bunch of diverse group of people who tended to like hunting or sportsmen or fishing or whatever. They'd all get together under one roof. They'd swap, they'd trade, they'd exchange information, and it'd be like a big social gathering. And then I saw it gradually in the late 80s into the 90s, and now even more so into the 2000s, it would become more profit-oriented, where a lot of people were jumping in because they saw a chance to make a quick buck. They really didn't care or really weren't even interested in the hobby. What they were more interested is what kind of expensive car could they afford if they managed to set up a bunch of shows. And a lot of times there was a clash between the people the gun show people, who were basically a pretty independent lot, with a group of people sometimes who were coming. They might run a flower show another time of the year, or they might run an antique show. And it was a very different orientation. And a lot of times I just saw them, it was like, it became very commercialized. That's what I guess I'm trying to say. I have to agree with you. And I just did a little bit of research over the last couple of days. There was a show that I used to love to attend, and it was in Pennsylvania. It was called the MAX, M-A-X. And that was the acronym for the Military Antique Extravaganza, MAX. There's another show called the Show of Shows, and that was in Kentucky, Louisville, Kentucky.
Then there was another show called the Wilmington Show. And these were shows for military artifacts and weapons. And it was just, and you'd find so many people there who would be willing to take their time, because they're going to be there for a couple of days. They'd set up on one day, and then they'd be there for a couple more days. And they would be delighted to tell you about history. They'd be delighted to tell you, their role in it, or someone they know, that person's role. And it was a great learning experience, but it's changed. The Max Show was purchased or acquired by OVMS, Ohio Valley Military Society. And those guys changed the rules. So they now, the Ohio Valley Military Society, now owns the Show of Shows, the Max, and Wilmington shows. And they have some rules, which I have a problem with. So let's go talk about that. Now, I remember I used to be able to go to a gun show, and you could see, if you wanted to buy a Third Reich flag with a swastika on it, an original flag that somebody brought back from World War II, you could. If you wanted to buy an Italian flag, you could. If you wanted to buy a Japanese rising sun or any flag from any nation, you could do that. And it was perfectly acceptable. But let me just read the new rules for the Ohio Valley Military Society. Number 1, German World War II flags. No original flag, pennant, or banner of any kind which contains a swastika emblem may be displayed on a pole, rack, cross pole, or by hanging it on a wall. Original German World War II flags may be displayed flat on a table. Number 2, modern replica items. No modern replica of any item which includes the swastika emblem or Confederate battle flag is permitted to be exhibited or sold. Adolf Hitler busts and artwork. Now, Adolf Hitler was an artist, and there were many busts of Adolf Hitler, and it says busts and statues of Adolf Hitler may not be displayed upright and must be laid flat on the table. Original period paintings, prints, posters which feature Adolf Hitler but might be subject to damage if laid flat can be displayed upright with the face of the subject covered. We suggest cloth, towel, etc., but not anything with an adhesive backing that would damage the artifact. Can you imagine? And then it goes on to uniforms and armbands. The shows have changed, and I don't think for the better, because these are true. I used to see true artifacts, flags, and we have some. We have some Nazi flags. We don't fly them, but we have them because they are historical artifacts of what really happened. Some of them have bullet holes in them. Actually, most of them do. We have a flag from a German battleship. I mean, this thing is huge. We could, it's so big that it would cover part of our roof.
I know exactly what you mean, because I can remember that I would trade, and sometimes I'd find a flag like that. Nobody wanted it, but just to be able to open it up was just, in other words, it was immense. It would take up the better side of a barn.
That's exactly right. And they were real. And they are proof of what happened. But yet, we're not allowed to see those things anymore at these shows. So what's happening is almost anyone who has one and would like to sell it, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. Here's another thing. A Ku Klux Klan memorabilia. This is item number 6. The sale, display, and wearing of a KKK memorabilia, both historic and modern, is absolutely prohibited. Why? Why?
Well,
it's history.
Yeah, but Vincent, I agree with what you're saying, but times were different back then, where it's a fine, not a fine line, but in other words, they're trying to erase history so people don't see what it was. But what I have found is that certain artifacts you mentioned, like the Nazi memorabilia. Now, it's compelling because when we grew up, in the 50s and the 60s and later, even now there's a resurgence where we had all those World War II movies. We had series like The Gallant Men or Combat that would try to show what it was like, as much as family TV would allow, of basically the battle between, the Axis powers and us. But one thing I've found with the Nazi memorabilia is that it's very, very hypnotic. And it's hypnotic. I think there's more to it than just what meets the eye. And I'm not saying that it's not compelling. I'm not saying that it's not fascinating. But as I get older and I realize how many people died because of it, or gave their lives for it, or for or against it, it starts to lose a lot of the compellingness there. They're beautiful things in the sense that you see the design work, the engineering, the craftsmanship that went into it. But I'll just say this. After World War II, there was so much of it lying around. A lot of people were sick of it. A lot of men brought stuff home in their duffel bags just as souvenirs. Nothing wrong with that. But I remember that there was a good family friend who was like an uncle to us. My mother and her sisters sewed a Santa Claus outfit out of a Nazi flag because they had that red banner material. And when I looked at it, my mother just happened to mention it to me years later. She says, "Oh, yeah, you see that?" She says, "Your Uncle Angelo brought home a Nazi flag, and and he cut it up, and they'd use it as drop cloths when they were painting rooms." I mean, things like this. But I'm just saying is that it's compelling, but it's hypnotic too.
I don't disagree. But it's history. And here's another thing. Have you, George, in your travels at these shows over the decades, seen German Nazi death cards, funeral cards? Have you seen those?
Is that where the family would get something like a card to commemorate a loved one that had died?
Yes.
Okay. I'll be honest with you, or probably if I saw him, I didn't recognize him for what that was.
Right. Hold that thought. We're going to a break. We'll be right back. George is with us. George is in New Hampshire. And so I'm at eBay right now, and I'm looking at, I did a search on German death cards. And what I saw was quite striking to me, because I've seen thousands of these. I've handled thousands of them. And on the front, you will see a picture of the fallen person in uniform, okay, with all the decorations. And then when the person is killed, then it says the date that the person was fallen and typically where. And on the back, which is very striking and surprising, I think many people don't know this, but there are religious symbols, icons. There is the Virgin Mary on some. There's Jesus on some. There's a cross on some. But most of them had Christian identifications on the back of the death cards. So these are like the size of a playing card. If you're going to play cards, that's about the size. And they were given out by the family of the fallen to family and friends. And the reason we have so many of them here is because our son was going to write the definitive encyclopedia. He had so many of them. He was going to build the volumes A through Z. And you could look up, for example, George Meyer. And you go the M volume and look up George Meyer, and there would be the information. And if you wanted it, you could have the encyclopedia set or just that M volume with the death card, the actual death card for Uncle George or Grandfather George or Great-Grandfather George in that volume. And that was what our son was going to do. But so many people are no longer interested. It no longer makes sense to produce that size of a volume of encyclopedia of the fallen soldiers of the Third Reich. But what I'm saying is, we don't talk about that anymore. That kind of stuff you used to be able to see at gun shows. But as you said, George, you're right. It's now profit-centered, profit-motivated. And the combination and the gobbling up of the little gun shows in favor of the big gun shows, I think has done a tremendous disservice to the knowledge sharing and the offerings that you could get at gun shows. Do you have a comment about that?
Yeah. Well, you know, and I know that older generation, they instilled in us, your handshake, deals were made on a handshake. Your word was your bond. And when you go to the shows, I feel a sense of loss when I go there because there's faces I don't see anymore. And then I'll ask. And then people will tell me, oh, he passed away, or he no longer does the shows. And I notice a lot of the younger ones who are coming up, they don't seem to have the morality of a dealer. Where, in other words, where you have a certain respect. Where, like, I know you and I, we go to the shows, and you stand back, and you see somebody trying to make a deal. Now, to me, the cardinal rule is you don't get in the middle of someone else's deal. Now, if they can't come to any kind of I don't know if I'm answering your question. I don't mean to get far afield.
No, you are. And No, you are, and you're bringing up a very good point. Please continue.
No, but I've noticed where, somebody might even come running up and will try to get in the middle of the deal, and that's a no-no. But I've always been respectful where I'd stand back and I'd wait, and then if they couldn't come to terms, as soon as the person turns around and walks away, I'd basically call them and say, excuse me, can I see that? And and I know we bought many things like that. And that's another good aspect of the gun shows. They call it the gun show loophole, where, in other words, private citizens, private people can just go to the show, meet up together, discuss something, come to terms, and make a deal right in the middle of it. And again, you try to size up the situation. You kind of see and know who is the real gun aficionado, or just, the armchair commando, or just a collector in general. And then who might be someone else who go ahead. But yeah. I don't see those people much at the gun shows because, like I said, the gun shows we're more of we're a fraternity.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. Class, George and I are talking about gun shows, and George mentioned the term gun show loophole. And that's what the media calls it. That's what the politicians call it. But it's really not a loophole. It's a right. And here's what I mean by that. If you have a refrigerator and you decide that you want to sell it, you can put it up for sale. You can have a garage sale. People can come over and say, how much is your refrigerator? And you can say, well, I'd like $100 for it. And they'd say, well, okay, or maybe you negotiate the price down from there. Well, you have the right to sell that because it's your personal property. Well, same thing is true with a gun, okay? And in many states, not everywhere, but in most states. So if you go to a gun show and someone owns a gun, just like a refrigerator, and he's walking around with it and it's his personal property or hers, they can sell it to anyone who lives in that same state. And that applies to most states. Not all, but most. And so that's what's called the gun show loophole. And I have an example of two things. I can tie or connect two dots that you mentioned, George. One is the code of conduct. So the idea is that if George is looking at a gun, that somebody's got one and it's for sale, and he can tell because of the way they're carrying it, or that it's got a little sign on it that says for sale, George may say, may I look at that? And the person would probably say, well, sure, and hand it to him. And then George would look at it and he'd say, well, this is interesting. And you might say, how much would you like for that? Isn't that the next thing that would happen, George?
Yeah.
Okay. And then what happens after that?
Well, in other words, the person, you could ask for a bill of sale if you come to terms. The money changes hands. Or he might see something that you have, and you might carry in, or you might have a table there to swap, and you might say, you see anything on the table that you might like? And sometimes he'd say, I'm looking for one of those, and or my son needs one of those, and it can defray the cost. And then I try to, walk away where, for me, it's a hobby. So, and I know it's the same with you, is that, in other words, it's basically the old-fashioned horse trading is what it is.
Mm-hmm. Right. So it's perfectly legal. It's perfectly above board if you're not a felon to do this. Well, here's the situation. I was at a gun show in Missouri. This was years ago. And a guy walked in with a Thompson 1927. And that is what looks like a submachine gun from the gangster days, okay? The roaring 20s, if you will. That was the gun he had. And it's considered a carbine. And sometimes they have drum magazines. Sometimes they have stick magazines. And it's really cool. And I always thought that'd be fun to have. Not that it's, really accurate, but wouldn't that be neat to have? So this guy had one, and I was near him, and I said, are you selling that? And he said, yes. And I said, well, may I see it? And he said, sure. So he handed it to me. All of a sudden, there was a crowd, and people were like squeezing in. I mean, it was close. It was uncomfortably close. And there was this guy breathing down my neck. I mean, I could feel his, and it bothered me. It bothered me so much. I turned around to him and I said, back off. I'm not like that. But I was really, he said, I'm just looking. I said, back off. And I meant it because it violated the code of conduct of a gun show. And that's what you're talking about. You mentioned that it's changed. Well, eventually, very shortly after, I said, I'll tell you what, why don't we go outside? Because I was either going to bring this whole crowd with me or they were going to leave me alone. So I held it in my hand and we walked outside the gun show into the parking lot. And I conducted the transaction with the seller. And I said to him, does this come with anything else? And he said, well, yeah, I've got the case for it in my car. It's okay. So that's a hard case. So that's another $30 worth of value to me.
Sure.
And it's got the cutout liner, so this Thompson fits perfectly.
It's a fitted case, yeah.
It's a fitted case. And it had place for the magazines and the cleaning tools and the instruction manual. And I said, does it come with anything else? He said, well, yeah, I've got 10 extra magazines. So that's great. And
no, Vin, one thing.
Yeah.
For the listening audience, though, they made Auto Ordnance made a semi-automatic, perfectly legal for the ordinary person to do. So even though it looks like a machine gun, it was basically a semi-automatic version of it, right?
That is correct. It is.
Right.
It is
I
not
just want
a
to
class
establish
3.
that because
I'm glad
you know what some people would run with.
I'm glad you did. I did not buy a machine gun. This is, you squeeze the trigger for each shot. You just don't hold this version of it. You can't just hold the trigger and have it fire off, and empty the magazine. It won't do that. It's one squeeze per round. Semi-automatic, not fully automatic. So, I said, do you have anything else? And he said, well, I've got some ammo. So now we have the semi-automatic 1927 Thompson, great condition, with the case, the cleaning tools, the manual, the extra magazines, and a case of ammo. I'm not talking about a box of ammo. I'm talking a case of ammo. All brand new. The ammo is new. For less than one of these would normally sell for. I couldn't believe it. And I didn't negotiate. I just gave him what he asked for it. And we were done. Now, I will not comment on whether I sold it or whether I still have it. I'm not going to comment on that. But what I'm saying is that's the way it's turned out to be. The good part was the seller was honest. The good part was the buyer was honest. The bad part is these trolls, these people who just wanted to jump me before we even established a price. They wanted to steal it. They wanted to steal the transaction. That's what they wanted to do.
But not
George.
only that, Vincent, but even in a supermarket, it's inappropriate for someone to be breathing down your neck. It's inappropriate to somebody to get that close in when two people are having a conversation and they're in the middle of whatever they're talking about. They weren't invited into the conversation. Now, I could understand if somebody stood off at a respectful distance and approached you afterwards and said, gee, could I see that? I've always wanted to hold one, something like that. But I noticed there just doesn't seem to be the decorum of even respecting the personal space around the person where you reach, there's that invisible barrier around you that, in other words, you don't violate a person's personal space. It's just not, I wouldn't feel comfortable, and I certainly wouldn't like it if it was done to me.
Well, and just take it to the refrigerator example. So, you're at a garage sale, and you're talking to the seller about the refrigerator, and then someone walks in and joins in and steps right in as close as you are. There's something wrong with that. It the same as if you're at Lowe's or Home Depot and you're buying a refrigerator and you're talking to the salesperson, and then someone comes in that close for that. It's totally unacceptable.
Well,
it's rude.
I've also seen it where you have something that you picked up, say, at a flea market. You pick it up, you're holding it in your hand. Somebody comes over to you and says, gee, can I see that? So you just say, well, you haven't spoken to you're going to go up to the person who has the seal, but you have it in his hand. And the person will just take it to look at it. Now, you hand it to him to look at it. Next thing you know, I see the guy, he yells over to the exhibitor, and he says, how much for this? And I said, excuse me. I said, I let you hold that. I said, I'm buying that. And I've actually had somebody, one time, I'm standing, somebody's negotiating with somebody who's selling. And I'm standing waiting next because there's something else he has that I'm interested in. And there's a guy who comes up a couple of minutes after I do. So he's waiting there. So then all of a sudden when it comes up to my way to turn, he says, excuse me, I wanted to look at that. So I turned to him and I said, see, I don't be rude and I'm not going to yell, but sometimes I'll make a joke out of it. But what I'm doing, it embarrasses them because I make them conscious of what they're doing. I said, excuse me, I was here before you, wasn't I? And then I repeated the question because he didn't answer. So he just kind of looked down and he didn't say a word. Well, I ended up buying the thing. But I'm saying you get all different types. And unfortunately, I've seen people they haven't done it with me, but they've actually taken something out of someone else's hand, like an older person. They'll take it out of their hand and they'll buy it. And to me, that's dirty pool. I don't go for that. I don't practice it, and I don't tolerate it. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Vincent. Go ahead.
No, you're right on. One day, I was at one of these big shows with our son, and there was an older guy there who we knew from Virginia, and so we were in a show in Pennsylvania, and there was the Max, and there was a guy who we knew from Virginia. He was an older guy, and we'd done business with him, and he was having trouble unloading his vehicle he was setting up for his table. And so my son and I said, well, would you like some help? We'd be glad to help you unload and pull those carts from your vehicle across the show floor and, like 1,000 feet, that kind of thing, and or at least hundreds of feet. And we helped him unload. And our son said he had a medal from World War II. And my son said, I'd like to buy that from you. And the guy said, well, I know you. I'll hold it for you. And come back tomorrow when the show opens and you can buy it. So they agreed on a price. Well, there was a dealer who was on television a lot, and I know this guy. And I was having dinner with him that night. And he said, you won't believe what I bought. I got this medal, and the seller promised it to some kid. But I bought it out from under him.
And you know, some never realized
so he
who he's talking to.
Yeah. So I said, you know what? You bought that out from under our son. I know the seller. I know the piece. And it's dishonorable what you did. And I exposed him. And he had to undo the sale, so my son bought it. But that's the kind of stuff that happens. Unscrupulous people. Disrespectful people. Dishonest people. We'll be right back. So the guy I'm talking about was on television and as a collector and a reseller of artifacts from the Great War and actually the Great Wars. And so I saw firsthand what this guy was like. And he has been shunned by the collecting village. Most people don't want anything to do with him. And he was on a television show called Pawn Stars, P-A-W-N, okay, as in pawn broker. And there he was. So I know the guy and don't have much respect for him at all because I saw what he did. I saw him over and over again, bragging about his deals, his shenanigans. The bottom line is, and that story is, just because someone's on television doesn't mean that person is honorable. It doesn't mean it. Have you seen...
may
yes.
I ask you a question, Vincent?
Sure.
Hello. Yeah. Now, remember, it takes two to tango. That guy was unscrupulous, but remember, the other gentleman who you and your son so graciously helped, and I've done the same thing for an older person. As they get older, I could see they were struggling. I'd help them, or sometimes they might have a flat tire, and I'd help them. And I'd see a lot of the other people just walk by them and not even take note. Mm-hmm. Some very selfish people in this world. But that other man gave his word to your son, and he says, I'll sell it to you tomorrow. Now, you know and I know in this world, we're in our late 60s, middle 60s, late 60s. We've seen a lot of things in this world, but remember the old school. Your word was your bond, and a handshake, you made an agreement, you stick by it. Now, that man gave his word and told your son, irregardless of whether your son helped him or not. In this case, your son went out of the way to help him, but he gave his word to your son, and he should have sold him the piece right then and there. There was nothing wrong with him just saying, here, just give me the money, or whatever, right then and there. But the thing is, I've seen people who, they've done things like this. It has happened to me, where I'd make an agreement with somebody, and the person knew I made an agreement with somebody for a certain item for a certain price, and then they'd come up to me, and they'd drop some money down on the table. They'd say, here, and they'd grab the piece. And I'd say, well, wait a minute, what are you doing? And they'd be giving me more than I agreed on with the other party. And I'd say, what are you doing? I said, look, I gave my word. I said, I can't do it. I said, now, if he passes it up, or he doesn't come through, I'll put you on backup. But I said, I can't sell it out from under him. But you'd be surprised how many people try to do things like that. But like you say, it doesn't make for a better world. But that other guy was wrong because he probably didn't want to offend that big wheel dealer because he figured the big wheel dealer might not buy other items he had later on. But he'd rather take an honest young man and basically slight him and see him get taken advantage of than to stand up and say, excuse me, but that's already spoken for.
Mm-hmm. Well, our son went to see the seller the next morning when he was supposed to pick it up, and he said, I don't see that item. And the seller said, well, I sold it. But I shouldn't have sold it, but I did. He admitted that he sold it, but he shouldn't have. And so And let me just tell you about the seller. And then I got a chance to see the seller up close. And for example, he would have a bunch of K98K Mauser rifles, German World War II bolt-action rifles. Now, if I had one and I were selling it, I would sell it complete. Whatever I had, I would sell it that way. But what this guy did was he would take out the cleaning rod, and he would sell that for $20. He would take off the front sight hood. He'd sell that for $20. And he would take out everything he could and sell it separately to make even more money. It's disgraceful. So both of those people are dishonest, and we got a chance to see that. So just because someone is older doesn't mean they're honest. Just because someone is on television doesn't mean they're honest.
In fact, some of these guys, those television programs are setups anyway.
They are, and this one was. And we know the dishonesty of this guy. He's universally disliked in the military collecting arena. Nobody likes this guy. Really, nobody. George, hey, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your wisdom and wealth of knowledge and experience.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, George. All right, coming up, we're going to be talking about wireless dangers. Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. This hour, we're going to be talking about wireless dangers, things that you need to know. Joe Esposito's with us. Stop Smart Meters in Oklahoma.org. Welcome, Joe.
Hey, Vince, how are you today, buddy?
Real well. Joe, I'd like to start out with an analogy about, with the FDA and the FCC. Now, this will sound like it has nothing to do with wireless, but actually it does. So Here we go. So I just read an article. It was published 14 February of this year, 2019, on dailymail.co.uk. Headline, USDA rules that pink slime, P-I-N-K space S-L-I-M-E, can be officially called ground beef. Lean, finely textured beef, dubbed pink slime, was reclassified as ground beef by the USDA, USDA as that's pronounced, U.S. Department of Agriculture, in December. It's made by heating beef trimmings and running them through a centrifuge and exposing them to ammonia gas. Okay? Now, finely textured beef, connective tissue, has been dubbed pink slime, but now the USDA calls this ground beef. So on December 21st, 2018, the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Food and Safety and Inspection Service, let me say it a different way, the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Food Safety and Inspection Service reclassified the controversial pink slime as simply ground beef. Pink slime is a food additive made from beef trimmings exposed to ammonia gas that in 2012 was reported to be found in 70% of American burgers. That's 7 out of 10 burgers. Okay, so what is pink slime? It's made from heating beef trimmings, the stuff you would throw away, running them through a centrifuge and exposing them to ammonia gas. Pink slime is banned in Canada. It's banned for human consumption in the European Union. But the USDA says it's beef. So we're going backwards. Okay? We're going backwards. We are now allowing filler to be added to beef and treating it with ammonia, and we're calling it beef. Now, how does that relate to wireless communications? Well, we just learned that the USDA Food Inspection, the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Food Safety and Inspection Service, reclassified a filler known as pink slime as beef. So if we can't trust them, can we trust the FCC to let us believe that wireless communications are safe? And the answer is, of course not.
No,
Joe Esposito.
Right. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, make back to the FDA. Well, I mean, have they done any science on what happens when you expose the beef to ammonia gas? I mean,
well, I
surely
can tell you that ammonia is toxic.
Yeah.
It's, absolutely, breathing ammonia is toxic. So why would we be treating food with ammonia? Okay, we wouldn't. But what this does is it allows us to add filler. There's two problems with these beef trimmings. Number one, what do you do with them? Okay, if you have a meat packing house, what do you do with all this stuff? Well, imagine being able to sell it to all your customers. Now you don't have the problem of getting rid of it. It's part of the food because they relabeled it. Instead of being pink slime, it's now beef. And Joe, when I would go to the Chinese factory outlet, Walmart, every once in a while I'd see a guy with a lab coat on. He'd be like the meat manager guy. He'd go in the back and he'd take out these ground beef packages and steak packages and so forth. And I'd say to him, does your beef have pink slime in it? Do you still use pink slime? And I'd say it loud enough for everybody to hear me, as if I'm hard of hearing. And they'd say yes.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Oh, my. But no, listen, I raised beef. I mean, I would go and watch them process the beef. And there is things they throw away. I mean, that's no question about it. And they do have, they debone them and do all that stuff. But, that's kind of insanity here. That doesn't even, the public ought to be outraged. I remember that back, I think when you were talking about that, it was on several talk shows and they showed it, what they were doing, and people were outraged. I mean, they ought to be outraged on this, with this kind of thing. I mean, I guess quit buying beef at the grocery store and start raising your own beef and having, the local butcher guy take care of them for you and get real food. That's not real food anymore. It's getting a bit more like plastics and stuff like that. It's terrible, terrible. But yeah, no, back to the FCC. You're exactly right on the comparison because the FCC has nothing to do with safety. Remember I was telling you George Carlo, the guy in 96 that brought in wireless, he even said that. Bob Anthony, the corporation commissioner here, he'll sit up there on his bench and like, King Anthony, and he'll proclaim that the FCC says it's safe. Well, the FCC has nothing to do with it. And if you don't believe me, pick up the phone right now, if you want, call the FCC and ask them to talk to somebody that is in control, oversees the safety and health of wireless. I mean, the lady will say, excuse me, sir, we have nothing to do with safety. All we do is license frequencies. And George Carlo's transcript that I took out of Generation Zapped that came out this last January, or January before, it was 18, he's telling you, none of this, they brought it in. They brought it into our country with no testing, no anything. And the FDA, your buddies, your FDA and EPA, all just gave it a pass, wireless, to come in, no testing. And then George Carlo says in the transcript, they felt, F-E-L-T, felt it was safe, so they didn't have to do any testing. So there's no science in felt, And then later on in his transcript, he's telling you that how bad some of the findings they were as they start doing more research. And he makes the comment, he says, well, if we had had pre-testing on all this before it came in, cell phones would have never even come into the market. So, Vince, now we have the whole world, like including the United States, is being radiated and cooked to death because wireless is nothing more than raw electricity. And it's never been tested. None of it's ever been tested. Not one device has been tested for health issues. So, these people out there think, oh, well, that can't be true, and all that. But they get on their phones and they get a dose of the dopamine and it gives them a feel-good thing. So they're getting drugged while they're doing it all. I mean, this whole thing is just insanity for this to even be happening. You're right what you're saying, though. You're right on.
Joe Esposito, there are people who, we've had some really fabulous expos. The most comprehensive expo ever was the USA Prepares Expo. That was our expo. And we had 7 of them over the years, and people are saying, hey, let's have another expo. Let's get together and, have people from all over the world get together, and we'll have those seminars. Let's do it again because it was so good. And my statement to all of those who would like to have another expo, I'd like you to send me an email, and send that email to instructor@usaprepares.com, instructor@usaprepares.com. And in the subject line, put another expo in capital letters. And then I'd like you to tell me your name and your contact information. This is just for me. And then I'd like you to tell me that you will leave your cell phone at home. I'd like you to tell me that. Okay? So if I get enough people who will tell me that they will come to an expo and not bring their cell phone, I will consider having one. Okay? But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to report, but not names. I will say, let's say next week. I will say, I checked my email at instructor@usaprepares.com, and here's how many people have said to me that they will come to our expo without a cell phone. They will leave it home. They won't bring it in their car. They will leave it home. Why? Because I don't want all points leading to our expo. I don't want people eavesdropping in at our expo for the things that we would say. And I will check. I will check everybody to see if you have a smartphone or a phone. I have equipment to do that. And if you do, you'll be turned away. So, and I mean it. So I'm considering, there's a remote possibility that we'd have an expo. Remote. If enough people are interested. But I want to see how many people would be interested. But no phones. And I will report the number. So, Tom, if you say that my name is Tom Dokes or Joe Dokes or Bill Harris or whatever your name is, I'm not going to report that. But I will count up the number of people who say how many people are interested in coming without a cell phone. I will report that number. And I know what's going to happen. Almost no one. So I'm going to report that. But if I'm pleasantly surprised, we might have an expo. So, Joe, here's something that I did years ago. There was an advertisement on the radio that I heard about, protecting yourself from electromagnetic radiation from smartphones. So I heard the advertisement. I called up, talked to the owner of the company, and I said, can you send me one? I'd like to evaluate it. I'd like to evaluate this device that you say will protect us from cell phone radiation. I got one. I put a cell phone in it, and I called the cell phone, and it rang. It rang. Let's talk about that when we come back. So, Joe Esposito, I got this product in the mail to evaluate it. I did not want to keep it. I said I would send it back after I tested it. And I tested the product by putting a cell phone in it, and I made a phone call to that cell phone, and it rang. So, obviously, it did not shield the electromagnetic radiation enough to prevent the cell phone from knowing it was being called by the cell phone tower. Then I took a cell phone, and I brought it to a company that specializes in cell phone technology. They sell cell phones, and they've got some experts at this particular company. I brought a cell phone there, and I said, let's test this. Let's test this product again. They had the same results that I had. It allowed the phone calls to be connected through this alleged protection device. And so then what we did was we took the cell phone and we put it in a microwave oven, unplugged the microwave oven, and called the cell phone. And the cell phone rang inside a microwave oven. Joe, have you ever done that?
Well, I can't remember. I might have, but let me say this. people tell me they do it, and it may not ring. I don't believe it. That is a valid test. Let me just say that. I don't believe it's valid as far as, I don't know, I'm not there. I don't know what they're doing. But I'll tell you this. When I have people turn their microwave oven on for 30 seconds, you'll put a little cup of water in there, and I have them turn it on for 30 seconds. And to this date, I've been at this 7 years now, there's not one microwave oven that I could not read maybe 100, 200, 300 feet from the oven, 360 degrees around it.
Well, that is very similar to what I'm saying. Now, you're testing it with your meter.
Right.
What I'm saying is you can if you unplug the microwave oven, because if you turn the microwave oven on, you'll blow the cell phone. There's no question about it.
You're right.
If you leave, okay. But if you'll just blow it, it'll cook it. But if you have and I would say, if you want to try it, unplug your microwave oven, put your cell phone in there, if you choose to do this, at your own risk, and call your cell phone, see if it rings. You'll find out that it rings. And so what I'm saying is that's a layman's way of a quick test to see if microwave ovens leak. And the answer is they all leak, which is what you just said, right?
Well, yeah, but I'm not even sure you can say they're leaking. They just radiate out of the things. I mean,
well, that would be microwave leakage coming, because that microwave cavity, that oven, is supposed to contain the radiation, but it doesn't.
No, well, that's why, Vince, when they first came out, they were called radar ranges. Okay, remember, I was in the Marines. I worked around radar. That's what damaged my health so bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
yes.
If it's a radar, it's got what they call a magnetron inside the thing.
Yes.
I mean, they're not safe. I mean, it's the most dangerous thing. And you see these children. I mean, I've got friends that are doctors, and they put their face in front of it to watch the popcorn pop.
I know, and I can I can say the same thing. We have friends that do that too, and we try not to use a microwave oven here at the house. But visitors will come and they'll take their cup of coffee and they'll stick it in there, and then they'll look at it as if it's a fishbowl.
Right.
I'm serious, and I go, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. As a matter of fact, I'll say something that I probably shouldn't say. I once read a book, and it had in it weapons, and it said that a person could take a magnetron, which that's the component within the microwave oven that produces the microwaves, and a person could take that, and this is extremely dangerous, and do not do this, class. But you could take that, or a person could take that, put it in a tube like a piece of downspout, let's say 8 feet long, and then aim it at the lawn and write words in the lawn with this invisible ray, and it'll kill the lawn.
Well, there's YouTubes up with there were some guys, young guys, that did something like that, but they used it like a gun, and they actually blew things up with it. That's
what I'm talking about. I didn't want to say it that way, but that's exactly what I'm talking about. This stuff is dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
And all microwave ovens leak. And when I say leak, I'm talking about emit electromagnetic microwave radiation.
If you read
no question about it.
Yeah, if you read it with my meter, that's what I found.
Yep, we'll be right back. Joe Esposito's with us. And StopSmartMetersInOklahoma.org is the website if you'd like to stay in touch with them. There's a technology called Digital Enhanced Cordless Telecommunications. Digital Enhanced Cordless Telecommunications, also known as DECT. And AT&T makes a cordless phone, and it's a real slim thing. It's tall and thin, and you can carry it around, and it uses gigahertz communication frequencies, like 1.9 gigahertz. So it's microwaves. And I can tell you for a fact that I tested one, and I took one of those, unplugged a microwave oven, stuck this cordless phone inside the microwave oven, closed the door, and called it, and answered the call, or it rang.
Huh.
So what I'm saying is, if you think that your microwave oven contains microwave radiation, it does not. It leaks out. If you think, and you can prove it by just sticking your phone in there and calling your phone, whether it be a cordless phone or a cell phone. This stuff is dangerous. That's the point. Joe?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely 100% right, 110% if you want. It's microwaves. Let me tell you just a quick story. We were at the state legislature, went into a legislator's office, my lawyer and another friend whose wife was being damaged with all these different symptoms, ear bleeds and all this other stuff. So we're sitting there waiting on the guy. He comes in and puts his cup of coffee in the microwave, and all three of us, we didn't talk to each other or nothing. We all jumped up and ran out. I mean, we know how bad it is. People just they're clueless about radiation. I was at a meeting yesterday morning. It was at a prominent hotel. It was a pretty good sized meeting. We were the first two at the table to sit down. And then about four other people showed up, and I'm sitting there in my $2,000 protective suit, right, where I couldn't be there from the radiation in that place. And these people sat down. I said, "Would you all mind turning off your cell phones?" And this lady says, "Where's the radiation?" They don't know, Vince.
I stopped going to meetups because I just absolutely positively was unsuccessful. Every week I would host a meetup at a restaurant every week, and I would prepare for it, and I'd spend my time. It would take me 8 hours a week between going to it, coming back from it, preparing for it, and being there. And all I wanted the attendees to do is leave their smartphone in their car. I couldn't get them all to do it. So I walked away. I left. I mean, really? Is it that hard? Is it? And I'm absolutely convinced if we got 100 people to send me an email, I'd be delighted to leave my cell phone at home. I want to come to an expo that you're hosting. I would be stunned if we got 100 people. Absolutely stunned, because people wouldn't do it. Joe Esposito, they'll say things like, "What if I get a flat tire?" Well, what if you got a flat tire in 1965 or 1975 or 1985? What did you do? You changed your tire. Right?
You're right.
Before you go to a convention, let's say you're going to be traveling 100 or 200 miles. You check the oil, you check the fluids, you check the tire pressure, you look at the tread, you make sure you've got some snacks and water and, blankets and whatever you need and food, and then you go.
Right.
And you try to avoid potholes. No, we are so dependent on that cell phone. Joe, I've driven all over. I've gone all the way to the bank, 19 miles without a cell phone. Can you imagine that? And back. I'm only kidding. What I'm saying is people are afraid to leave their cell phones home. And I was actually listening very carefully to what you're saying about this meeting and with people coming in. And I thought you were going to say that everyone except you came to the table, sat down, and as they were sitting down, took the smartphone out of the pocket and put it in front of them. That's what you were going to say.
You're right. There was a meeting. I was trying to help this lady. She helps dyslexic children learn, and her building is right across the street from two cell towers. And so I was trying to help this board of probably about 6 couples understand all this. So we held a meeting, right? So what do? They all walk into a husband and wife, each one of them. As soon as they sat down, all those couples put their cell phone on the table. You're exactly right.
I see it all the time, and I don't want any part of it. I really don't. I see doctors with cell phones in their shirt pocket, right next to their heart.
That's right. Yep.
I see doctors looking in the microwave oven, as if it's something they've never seen before, watching the coffee go round and round. I've seen it. I've seen people put potatoes. They'll take a potato, wash it. They'll put it in a plastic baggie, poke holes in the potato first, put it in a baggie, put it in the microwave oven, and watch this thing almost boil in the plastic bag.
Wow.
And now they're eating plastic because they're melting the plastic onto the potato.
Oh, wow.
I can't believe it.
Well,
Joe,
yeah.
I looked up the statistics. According to the Pew Research Center, in 2018, 95% of Americans have a mobile phone. 77% of them have a smartphone. Back in 2011, that percentage was 35%. 95% of Americans have a smartphone. I've seen children with smartphones. Yeah. I mean, I'm talking like 12 years old, 10 years old. Really? For what? Why? Is it impossible to get along without one? People have come to our house and want to use Wi-Fi, and I just simply say, we don't have Wi-Fi. It stops it right there. We don't have Wi-Fi. They don't say, are you retarded? How come you don't have Wi-Fi? They don't know what the next question to ask is. They don't know what to say. They're stunned.
Well,
I'm not kidding. They're stunned when I say we don't have Wi-Fi. If I go someplace, I do a transaction at a store, and they go, may we have your cell phone number? I don't have one. You don't have a cell phone?
Yeah, if you go through one of those checkpoints where they, put all your stuff through it and wand you and all that, I walk up to those things, and they say, where's your cell phone? I said, I don't have one. They just don't believe it.
Right. It's almost like it's illegal not to have a cell phone.
Yeah.
Okay. According to Pew Research Center, the age group of 18 to 29 has 100% ownership of cell phones. Now, I find that hard to believe, but that's what they say. 18 to 29. I think it's, I would say it's probably in the 90% neighborhood, but that's what they're saying. Can you imagine? Joe, what is your reaction to this? So you get in a subway car. What is the likelihood that everyone in it, let's say New York City, for example, what's the likelihood that everyone has a cell phone in a subway?
I'd say about 100%.
Okay. So now we're in a microwave oven, right? This subway is metal on the bottom, metal on the sides, metal on the top, except for some glass. Just like a microwave oven, right? So now we have, 80 cell phones?
Well,
at 1 watt apiece?
Yeah, I've read the cell phones. They're putting out something like, 56,000 microwatts per meter squared. That's a lot of radiation per cell phone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So now you have all these people. Now, what's the possibility that they're using their cell phones while they're on the subway?
Is it like no one?
I've been at doctor's appointments. I've been designated driver, so I'll go into the doctor's appointment and I'll sit in the waiting room, and I look around. The TV will be on. It'll be some stupid program that that's not offensive to everybody. It's just actually, it's offensive to people who have a brain. I mean, just idiot stuff, and that's what's on TV. Then they have magazines, but nobody's reading the magazines except me, and everyone else is looking down at their smartphone.
That's right.
They're either texting, they're playing a game, they're doing their cell phones in their hands. They've got that thing. Both hands are gripping that cell phone, as if it's going to take off on them or something.
And it's usually between your legs.
Yes. Good spot. So we're going to have fewer GDP to worry about, meaning generally dumb people or generally dumb public, because they're killing themselves.
Right.
And how is it possible that person was saying didn't know about radiation? Can you explain that a little further? So this person was looking for it. Was it a particular color radiation that she was looking for? Did it have a particular smell? What was she thinking?
Well, they just see the problem is the public. They've so deceived the public with smart meters and all the stuff. It's all the same. Because they can't hear, see, touch, or feel the stuff, they don't realize it even exists, and they try to keep all of it very quiet. The telecoms, they don't like to let any of that information out. But you walk in with a meter like mine, the RF analyzer, and you turn that baby on, and it scares people. You know, even the state legislature said you can come, but don't bring that meter, because see, you're telling the public what's happening. They really don't know. They've just not been taught. They don't know. There's been nothing about it. You know, in the press, you can't get any press coverage. You can't get any TV coverage about any of this. And so they cover it all up, and so the public doesn't know what's happening.
Joe, when I get one, here's what I plan to do. This ought to be a lot of fun. I would walk into, a doctor's office, like at a hospital, and in the waiting room, like Columbo, with this thing beeping like crazy. And I'd be looking around like, I don't understand. Wonder what this is all about. Everybody would be looking at me. Everybody. We'll be right back. Joe Esposito, StopSmartMetersInOklahoma.org. Joe, I'm becoming angrier because ignorant people are invading my space for non-essential reasons. Let me give you an example, and then I'd like to be quiet and have you react to what I'm about to say. Okay. Americans with smartphones do more than half of their media consumption using their smartphones. Millennials, about 48% of them, will only watch videos on a smartphone. More people read email on their smartphones than a desktop. More than half of U.S. smartphone users reach for their phone as soon as they wake up. The average cell phone user touches his or her cell phone 2,600 times a day. That's 2,600 times a day. Heavy users touch their cell phones 5,400 times a day. Apple reported that the average iPhone user unlocks their phone 80 times a day. The average teenager sends more than 3,300 texts a month, and 71% of students reported they received texts during class. Cell phone use is 58% in schools, with a ban on mobile devices. Joe Esposito, your thoughts?
Well, here, I'll put it simply in this little story real quick. Get on the Internet, look up Jimmy Gonzalez, a 42-year-old ex-Marine lawyer in Pembroke Pines, Florida. He was before the city council, 8 men at YouTube. He held the cell phone in his left hand. He put it in his left jacket pocket and held it to the left side of his head. He held up his hand during the meeting and said, if you look at my hand, they cut cancer out of my hand. And then he puts it in his left jacket pocket. He has his left aorta has a tumor on it. He had cancer cut out of his head on the left ear. He's dead at 42 years old. So all I can tell you after listening to what you just said, there's going to be a bunch of dead people out there.
Okay. I know a gal. I talked to her last night. She has a brain tumor. She's already been operated on. I know another gal in Virginia. Brain tumor has been operated on. That's 2. Now, how is it possible that I know 2 people with brain tumors? How is that possible? It's only possible with microwave radiation, in my opinion.
You're right. You're 100% right. Because people do not understand the technology. They don't understand what they're using. Nobody's telling them. Nobody's sounding the alarm, except maybe you and me and a few others. They're not being told what's happening. It's just like Jimmy Gonzalez. They didn't tell him. So he got it. He suffers. And so then he was trying to tell the public what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and people like us are ridiculed and beaten up by our deranged provocateurs on the internet. Like, here's the kind of stuff that they're talking about. What a bunch of jerks that, USA Prepares is. Don't listen to those guys because they're a bunch of idiots. It's absolutely not true. We're the ones who are sounding the alarm. And frankly, I challenge anybody to find things that we've said that's not true. Try it.
Well, you just look at, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to, like Anthony B. Miller. He just came out, World Health Advisor, epidemiologist, MD, oncologist, just came out just this last year, and he said, any, hello, class, are you listening? Write this down. The word any, wireless source causes cancer. Hello? I mean, look at Martin Paul. He did that letter to Jerry Brown trying to stop 5G. He's telling you the voltage-gated calcium channels in your cells can't handle 7.2 million times the wireless on your cells. They can't handle it.
Joe Esposito, you are a courageous man. I really appreciate what you're doing. I really do. Because to come out and say the things that you do takes guts and courage. And it puts a target on you just for telling the truth against the big bad machine.
Well, there's a lot of people hurting out there and a lot of people being damaged by the day. You got to tell the truth.
Absolutely. Joe Esposito, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. We'll see you again and again.
Take care. Bye.